Welcome to Spirit School. My name is Danielle Sarenk, also known as the Squamish Medium. I am the host of your Spirit School, where I will share all the lessons and learnings that I have uncovered through my intuitive development and mediumship development journey. I am a professional psychic and medium, an intuitive teacher and mentor, and I look forward to walking alongside you on this journey. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Spirit School. I am very excited today for the episode. I have Medium Fleur here, who's an internationally acclaimed medium. She is LA-based. This is somebody who I have personally followed her journey probably since 2015. I started watching YouTube videos and just being so interested in the way that she works and the way that she relays Spirit's messages. We're going to talk about her podcast today, which is Moving Beyond, which is one that I highly recommend that people who are interested in mediumship at all, or healing from grief, or are even doubting mediumship and need some real evidence that this connection exists, I highly recommend this podcast to people. But I just want to invite Medium Fleur on the podcast. Thank you so much for coming today.
Much for having me.
Yes, I'm very, very excited. I have so many questions for you. I'm going to try very hard to stay on track, on topic as far as I can. But my Instagram audience too is very excited to see you coming on. So I have some questions from them as well. Do you want to maybe start with like a little bit of your journey, how you kind of came into mediumship and what that looked like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, people always ask me, when was your first experience? And I really don't have any memory of it. I would say from the time that I could begin talking in full sentences, I think my parents were really the ones who noticed that I was bringing up a lot of detailed information about people who they knew to be passed over. And at the time, I was also very weirdly lucky in that my nanny was from Indonesia, and she was a psychic herself.
Mm-hmm.
So she kind of explained it to my parents, and my parents were like, okay, that sounds pretty out there, but we'll go with it. And it really wasn't encouraged or discouraged from that point on. It was just kind of my thing. And I became very aware of it being not normal, so to speak, and made a lot of effort to hide that part, which I think is pretty normal across the board from people who are at all sensitive. So it wasn't really until I was about 18 that it showing up for me again, and I'd largely turned it off at that point for, I would say, 8 years. Came to UCLA in California, was driven to being a doctor, and I just kept getting incredibly sick to the point that I had to take off of school. And at that point, being a complete nerd, taking off 6 months of school was like a death sentence for me. It's like, I have not worked this hard to quite literally not be able to go on. And no one could really figure out what it was. Doctors couldn't figure it out. People were saying I was making it up. But I really just couldn't get out of bed for no reason. And I ended up, my parents were quite worried about me at the time, and my dad, out of hopelessness, I think, because he is an engineer, was like, well, maybe you should go see a medium. You were really weird as a kid, and you should just go see someone. So I did, and I sat in front of a psychic here in Los Angeles, and she sat me down, and she goes, oh, well, you're not living the life you're supposed to be living. You're a medium. Readings within this next year, and if you don't, you're not living your life path, and you're gonna pass. And I was like, excuse me? Like, I'm 19, I have no plans on dying, but the things that she had said were really resonating, and I thought, okay, well, guess I'm gonna start meditating or something. And so really over that next year, I in a year and a half, I was doing readings, mostly from my own curiosity to go, is this a real thing? I was also in school for neuroscience at the time, and so it was really a back and forth between, is this real? Am I making it up? And so that first 2 years, I charged very little. I think I charged maybe like $20 a session, and my whole idea behind it was kind of fact checking it for myself. I really wanted to ask, like, how accurate is this? And are you just saying yes because you want it to be a yes, or are you are you actually saying she had 3 daughters? You know, that kind of thing.
Mm.
And so I was very, very skeptical for yearly going back and forth on it, and ultimately decided for myself, like, well, you know, this is pretty factual. And here I am, what, 11 years later?
Wow.
Still doing it.
Well, and that's one thing I notice about your mediumship. Like, I love studying mediumship. I love the history of mediumship and studying other mediums from like a lens of admiration. I'm just like, wow, you can do that. You can do that. You have an incredible accuracy when it comes to getting to the root of someone's pain, getting to the root of what people are really needing to hear at that soul level. And so was there something that you had to do to kind of like develop that accuracy? Because you're no fluffer, like there's no fluff in your readings. It's like basically exactly what they need to hear. How did you end up getting there?
Well, I think it's two-part, right? I'm originally from the Netherlands, and I feel like Dutch people just don't have much fluff. So that's part of it. I really just, for myself, I read the way I want to be read for. And if someone goes on about rainbows, for me, it's like eye roll. Like, come on, give me some facts, right? So I think I also operate from a Dutch perspective, which is how I was raised, which is pretty just down to the facts. And then also coming from a science background, I think from the very beginning, I just wanted to make sure for myself, right? So it was this need to prove to myself that ultimately developed into pretty accurate readings because I was looking for the facts. And didn't really, it wasn't very, I'm really, as I grow old, my biggest thing is just to be kinder to myself, to give myself more leeway, but it's for myself with the fact. Looking back, I think it was just hours and hours and hours of practice, to be quite honest.
Yeah. So do you think like mediumship is something like you just get better at the more you do it, the more you stick to it, the more you stay curious and open? Do you think like you just continue to get better and better and better?
I do, yeah. I think it's such a difficult process because mediumship requires one to be open and go with the flow, but you also want to have the skill set of focus and clarity and kind of analyzing someone, right? Like you're analyzing either someone who's on the spirit side or you're doing the 20 questions within yourself of the person in front of you. It's this really weird combination of digging in and doing the practice and then also allowing it to go. But I think anyone can achieve both things. I think it really is something where you may start at a certain skill level and then climb the ladder, and where you start may just be, you know, where you're supposed to be. But I do think anyone can scale up a notch or two.
Mm, definitely. Okay. Very cool. And then I have some like really detailed questions, which I give you a heads up on because this is the way my brain works. I'm always like, how does it work for other people? Because I never had teachers who were vulnerable or shared their process completely. Like it was like a secret they couldn't give away. And so
Mm.
anytime I get a chance to sit with somebody like at your level, I'm like, okay, what does it sound like when spirit gives you a name? Like, how do you get those?
Yeah. So I have explained this to my students so many times in trying to find metaphor, right? Because I think it's really hard words because a lot of them are just experiences. It's probably like how love doesn't quite word love doesn't quite encompass the different variations of love that you can feel. So it kind of becomes a little bit of a blanket statement. That's part of. So as I go along, if there's part of it where you're like, oh, makes sense, let me know because it might just be I'm using the wrong word. But for you individually. But I think for me, first of all, I've learned over time that my whole energy base of the way my thoughts and the rate of my thoughts is different when I'm in space versus when I'm in a space like this where I'm holding a conversation. So that's the first thing that I look for. I think that as time goes on, it takes me less time to get into that space, but it also is very dependent on my own emotional state in whatever I'm going on with my that time. So if my life is a little chaotic, I know that before I start a session, it's going to take me more time to get into the headspace that would be in allowance of all of this. But all the same, I think there's a very strong indicator for every single person that tells you I'm in the space in which I receive well, or I'm not in that space yet. And that's personal for the individual. But for me, my thoughts are a little slower. The world feels a little slower. I do find there's different ways into that. One of those ways is tracking, and you can look that up. It's kind of one of the mindfulness tricks. I can do it through meditation, but it's absolutely the foundation of everything. If I can't get there, then how I receive is going to be through a lens of my own rational thought. And so if I know that I'm not in that space, then there's really no point moving forward, right? Aside from that, mediumship feels really different from psychic. I like to explain it to people who aren't really super familiar with the world as psychic being dead information, so to speak. It feels like a book. I'm not holding a conversation with an intelligence. Like, it's information that's available and just is. So the energy between that is quite different. That I kind of see, from me, it's like a daydream. It doesn't require me to close my eyes. I can keep my eye open. It'll flash in front of me. I find that if I'm reading accurately, those images do not stay for very long, and they quickly shift into something else without much control on my end. But I do find I can ask those images to do things. In my readings, I love the idea of 20 questions. So I'm constantly asking information from the information I've got. And I find that it does unlock things. So I think there's a certain curiosity around it that helps. And when I do mediumship, all mediumship from me, so the connection to spirit, it starts through clairsentience. So I don't start connecting with someone in spirit until I can feel them. And that's shifted as to what that feels like over the years, but I will say I'm never going to jump into a connection with someone on the other side unless I feel the density shift for me, where I know, okay, I've got a person right here. And I could go on and on and on about it. So maybe just like ask me about the Claires, or there's so much to unpack here. And I talk about it a lot in my mentorship classes, and I've got one going right now, and there's another one coming up. But I think, these little details on what you're looking for and how you can adjust your vibration, that's the key to all of it. I think that everyone has the ability to turn on the radio, and it's the ability to hold a certain station for an hour and have not only the energy capacity to hold it, but also be able to fine tune. That really differentiates a good medium, so to speak, or a good psychic from someone who can't hold the energy.
Yes, definitely. I really appreciate you explaining that. And I truly believe too, the first thing you should do is be able to sense spirit around you. And I do notice too, really early on, we sit in a state of just receiving and not fully understanding that we can ask the world of spirit questions as well. It's like the two-way conversation, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So very interesting. And it's funny too, because I started my readings at $20 too back in the day. For sure. That was so funny. Yeah. I just think that it's really interesting too, how you're able to get relationships right away. You're like, yep, I have a mother, I have a father. Again, listening to the podcast Moving Beyond is just so phenomenal to listen to. Your development journey though, and I love that you teach, and you have the 10-minute intuition journal as well, which I'll link everything in the show notes so that people know how they can work with you. But who did you study under? Did you do one-on-one mentorship with people, or did you go more of a route because you have the scientific background of just trying to figure it out yourself?
Yeah, I would say I mostly figured it out myself. I took classes here and there with people that I then went on to wonderfully get to have just personal relationships with. So one of those people was Tony Stockwell. I've taken a few classes with him, and then later on I got to work with him, and he's just one of those amazing people that I really, really look up to. He was one of the people that really kind of pushed me off my own cliff, so to speak, in that I think I was 22 or something, and I wanted to join some mentorship group he had. And he looked at me and he's like, go teach your own mentorship group. Get out of mine. Just go teach your own, please. And it was just it was someone I just respected so much, who had no ego around going, you know what, you just need to learn through experience. Please just go do the learning by yourself now, you know? You don't need me to hold your hand. You're fine. You've got this. So I was really lucky in that I met some really big players in almost the first year of doing mediumship. I sat in front of this medium who told me that I was a medium, and 6 months later, I met Lisa Williams, and she introduced me to Tony Stockwell 3 months after that, and Tony Stockwell introduced me to James from Prague 2 months after that, and somehow I ended up with all their cell phone numbers within 1 year. So it was just this crazy, oh, okay. And then nothing really happened from that point on, because each one of them pretty much said the same thing, which is go into the world and practice, right? So that's ultimately where you get good, is just seeing all these different energy patterns and getting to know them in and out, and developing your own confidence and your own relationship with spirit and your own spirituality. And so I think early on I had such a gift of getting this push from all those different people, and they were also good to me.
Yeah, I love that. And I've taken a few retreats with Tony Stockwell too. He's probably one of the funniest people I've ever met. Like, I had to actually leave one of his workshops because I couldn't stop laughing. I was like 9 months pregnant at the time. And yeah, he's
I'm
so
sure you got a real kick out of that.
oh yeah, I was just, yeah, it was the funniest thing. He's the funniest teacher. He was actually supposed to come to Vancouver in June, but that's obviously not happening now. And I know that you guys teach together too sometimes in LA, right?
Yeah, he has come before, and I'd love to bring him out here again. And I agree, he is so funny. I just feel super lucky that he's in my life.
Yeah, his philosophies really stick with me too. He's just one of those teachers that just, he says something so profound that like you haven't really thought of it like that before, and those philosophies really stick with you. They really get you thinking. Really, really enjoyed him as well. So did you then, because it seems like you felt very supported early on. Now, my journey was a little bit different, where no one believed in what I did. My husband doesn't believe in the afterlife. Like, I didn't ever feel super supported. So I feel like my journey, and some other people who are like me, our journey was overcoming a lot of fear, overcoming a lot of, insecurities when it comes to this. Did you ever have to get over that kind of stuff? Get out of your own way?
It sounds easy in that, I was 18 or 19 and I sat in front of this medium, but getting to that point was really difficult. I mean, I was so stubborn about it. Quite literally made me incredibly ill.
Mm,
Um, I did not believe in it. I thought it was so stupid. I did not want to be that kind of person. I thought okay, well, now I'm just going to be odd for forever. And also my entire friend group was very science based, right? So all the people I knew definitely thought that was totally crazy. And looking back, it's silly because I was 19, but that was my life. So I was so terrified of it that I actually worked under a fake name for, I think, 3.5 years. And
wow.
I worked out of a literal closet. I worked in this tiny closet because I shared a bedroom with my roommate at the time, because Los Angeles is very expensive for a student. So for 3 years, I worked out of a tiny closet, did not soul, name, terrified that someone would out me. Um, and even being to meet Lisa Williams, James from Prague, Tony Stockwell, it really did nothing to shake that for a number of years. I would watch their videos over and over and over again and be like, well, they can do it. That seemed real to me. So maybe I can do it too, in my kind of darkest moments of that. But it was not easy. It was really, really hard. And I think that this was also about 10 years ago, and 10 years ago, this was not open in the way
Mm,
it is now. And I thought I was going to throw my whole life out the window, right? Who was going to let me go to medical school if they found out that I was a medium? So it just felt like this huge risk. And looking back, I'm not quite sure what made me take some of the bigger risks, because I really did at one point go, oh, well, this is what I'm doing. And it was such an internal drive, but I really battled my brain with just back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, just constant.
I bet. And then you also do like really large group events, right? So when did you actually come out? I just did my first one in February after 7 years, and it was probably the scariest thing I've ever done. So what made you go into like these big auditorium like group events, and how was that for you?
Yeah, it's funny. When I was a kid, I had terrible stage fright. Um, it's like I played the violin for 20 years and I stopped. And one of the reasons was that I just hated performing in front of other people. I would shake so bad that I couldn't even play. Like my fingers would just uncontrollably shake. And so I did not think that the whole stage thing was going to be something I wanted to do. But I think I did my first small group right around 24, 25. So I'd been working at that point for probably about 4 or 5 years. I remember walking out on stage and it was probably only maybe 25 people or something, maybe 30 people. And the minute I walked on stage, it was the funniest thing. I got this overwhelming calm in me, and it was like my whole being went, this is what you were meant to do. And it was so weird. And I can't quite explain it because I never had that with readings. But going out on stage felt so right. And I do get a lot of stage fright, but the minute I start, it completely evaporates. I don't know how to explain it. It's not me entirely. I feel like I'm just kind of lifted into this odd space, and I really, really love it. So it's probably my favorite part of the job, so to speak. And yeah, so I can't really say it's the beginning part of it, like getting on stage is terrifying. I always want to run away. And once I'm on there, I'm okay.
It's such a breath of fresh air to hear that journey because, it took me about 7 years to go on stage. And a lot of the peers that I'm connected with get into group stuff and these larger events like right away. And I kept thinking like, why am I not feeling the calling to do this? Or why am I so scared? And the first time I went up, I was so scared I couldn't even meditate before. I was so terrified. And the same thing happened. I stood in front of this group and I just started talking, and I was super calm and a little bit of a showman for like an hour and a half. And then afterwards, I was like, I couldn't sleep for 2 days. Like the energy was just like so intense.
Oh,
Yeah.
I, well, I agree. And I always try to tell my students that too. I'm a little bit of a hard teacher in that way, where I just really feel like you should be really confident in your one-to-one work, because when you get on stage, you're representing the work, and that's not just about you. And so I think it's really important that you do the work before you get on stage, so that you can, yeah, you can kind of represent the best of it, you know.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, I really, really like that. And then before we move into the Moving Beyond podcast, 'cause I have so many questions about that. Um, you're going into a master's program right now for forensic studies.
Yeah, it's forensics has a really big draw for me. It's not an easy field for mediums, in that homicide departments, especially in the States, and I'm pretty sure it's worldwide, but they have a lot of them in their constitution. Okay, we're a homicide department, and these are, the 15 rules that govern us. Number 4 and number 5 will usually say something like, we do not work with psychics or mediums. So right from the bat, you've got this really big block. And so I've worked with a few, and I had this amazing experience with one um, that really motivated me into wanting to do that kind of work, but knowing that it was going to have to break down quite a number of barriers over probably decades. And so my first step towards that was, let me get a master's in forensic science so that I don't have to come at it from only being the psychic medium, right? That it maybe opens up some sort of tiny crack in a door that would grant me access where I would otherwise be denied. So I don't really have like a bigger picture of it, other than it felt like a good first step.
Mm.
And it's going to take me a few years to complete the degree, because it's a master's degree. But yeah, that's the thought.
I love that you had like really high ambitions for like, next level education really early on. You filled kind of like the mediumship boots, and now you're able to kind of do both. You're going back for your higher education. You're able to serve the world spirit. It's awesome that you're able to still do all that, because I had a very similar experience where I called myself Squamish Medium because I was in the corporate world in Indigenous health and healing, and I didn't want my name attached to it because I was so afraid about my reputation of the career.
Yeah,
And I felt like I had to pick one or the other. It was like one or the other.
absolutely. And I don't think it has to be quite that way anymore, depending on probably where you live. But yeah, I think it's not unusual. And it sounds like, you're very much not alone in that.
Yeah, no, I love that. So the Moving Beyond podcast, I don't even know how I found it, Fleur, because like I've been following you for a while, and I feel like I got on there like just when you guys posted and published the first episode, and then I shared it to my Instagram stories, and I had at least 20 DMs within the next day saying like people were just like bawling. And that first episode I listened to, I can't remember her name, but she did not cry. I'm like, how is this girl not crying? I'm
Yeah,
like,
no, we definitely did that show because it was our launch, and we're like, why did she not cry?
I don't
But
know if it's a British thing, but I was like, how is this girl dry-eyed here?
so funny because right after we wrapped, she goes, "I didn't cry," and we were like, "Yeah, that's okay, I guess, but you really could have. Like, it would have been okay, you know."
She needs more time with Claire.
Yeah. No, yeah, Claire was like, I couldn't. She was like tight-lipped. We were like, yeah, I hope she got what she needed out of it. But I really do think she did. Just people grieve in different ways, and it's really interesting. I feel like I understand that. Being Dutch, we do not grieve like that either. If in the times that I've had a mediumship reading and it was very emotional, I too do not cry.
Mm,
There's no way you're ever going to see me shed a tear in a mediumship group or in front of someone. Like, I will go home and do that because that's how my family operates, and that is also cultural, so I do get it. I think it can be surprising to people, but for me, it's like, why? You're just processing it, and you'll sort out your emotions later.
yeah. Well, I was crying all around my neighborhood because I listen to your podcast when I go for my nightly walk, and I never cry. But I don't cry in my readings. Like I hold it together and just
Yeah.
try to stay composed. So I totally get that too. I felt too. I was like, oh, I think it's a cultural thing because I know I have a lot of British friends, and my first husband was British, and it's very, you know, a lot of they just don't want to cry.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's also one of those things where it's not like people don't cry. They just don't do it in more public spaces, I think.
For sure. So where did the idea come from? Because it's so beautiful. And I'm not familiar with Claire's work, but her voice is so soothing. Like both of your voices are just incredibly soothing. So where did the idea come from for Moving Beyond? And like what gives you the most joy out of it? Like what's your experience as the medium in this experience with the podcast?
I'll start with that point because it has been one of the coolest things that I've ever put together, in that I feel when I'm doing a reading, and maybe that you have this experience as well, people don't always, or very often, especially now, and maybe it's just because I've grown in popularity, they won't email, they won't say anything. I just get the yes and no through a reading and they leave. And I go, well, I hope that did something, you
Yeah.
know? And I might not hear back from them for years, and then I'll see them in a grocery store or something, and they go, "Oh my God, that changed my life." And I'm like, I don't even remember the reading, so I don't have any reference point for that. It's really lovely that they had that experience, but I don't get to experience it with them. And the podcast has changed all of that. Like, I get to do my reading, and then when all is said and done, I do my reading, I get to go back and listen to Claire's, and it's so cool. So it is just amazing to watch these people have transformations. We had done a looking back episode to see, where people are now. I was not expecting people to have the big shifts that they had in a short period of time. That
Mm.
was really surprising to me in such a heart-filling way. It really did, give me that sense of, oh, we're doing something here. This is cool. And the idea really came, honestly, because Claire and I work in tandem all the time. We had met about 6 years ago when I did a reading for her shortly after her best friend died. And she was writing a book at the time called After This. It was a yeah, and I guess a way for her to figure out what mediumship meant for her. She went to go visit tons of mediums, including James Van Praagh and Teresa Caputo, and kind of went all over the country and had finished writing the book. And met with me and rewrote one of the chapters and then handed it over. So I ended up being chapter 10. And from that point on, we lived pretty close by at the time, so we just became friends. And so, years of working would make it so that if she had a client she really thought could benefit, she would send him over to me. And if I had a client who I thought could benefit, I would send them over her to her side. And we never really talked about the clients, nor did we ever really say, oh, I send a client over to you. We would just tell them individually, and then they would, ultimately find their way or not. And so it was a few years of that. And I thought, I really wonder if we could put something together where we can show people's transformation. And
Mm.
that's what created the podcast.
Yeah, it is beautiful. It is beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And again, everyone who mentors under me, I'm like, you got to listen to this podcast. It just goes to showcase the impact that mediumship could have on somebody's grieving journey.
Yeah, thank you for sharing it. I am really proud of it, and for that reason too. It's it's just one of those things that I thought, we don't really have that anywhere. Like, I don't know of any medium that has really done readings that are kind of like available to be listened in on, you know?
No, absolutely not. And it's very courageous of you to do that, because even me, like, I send some clips of my readings with permission from my clients just to my students so they can get kind of an idea of like the structure. But I too don't know, other than what was on Hay House with James and John Holland and stuff doing live readings on the radio, but those are totally different. Those are a little bit more drive-by reading style, right?
Yeah, I've done those too, and you get like 3 to 5 minutes, and you're just going boom, boom, boom. But like, we as an audience don't really get to know the caller. We don't know where their needs are, and so I had always just wanted, especially when I was first starting, and I'm sure you're the same. I scoured the internet to watch other people read.
Well, and that's why I started this podcast, because it was like I couldn't find anyone who was like talking about the details that satisfied me on like the details of mediumship, the connection. And you doubt it when you kind of feel alone, because I still don't have a huge cohort of other people who are working mediums. And so I was scouring YouTube, which is how I found you, just like listening to other people work, because I think like it's really good to, I don't know, find some normalcy in what we're doing, because it doesn't always feel normal.
Right. Yeah, it is not normal, actually. But but I do think it's awesome. And you're right, it does have similarities across the board. And you're going to find ways of working that works for somebody and not for you. And then you can adjust it to match your own style. And I think that's what it's all about, right? But if you don't have all those different ways to try out, um, it can feel quite stuck.
Yeah. So what's your best advice? Because you teach a lot, and on your Instagram, I'll tag your Instagram on here too. I've been following you for a while, and you post really great videos from your classes, which again, your readings have no fluff. Your classes have no fluff either. Like, you give such useful and valuable information even on your Instagram. So I will tag people to that. But what is like somebody who's like kind of scared to tap into their abilities? I know a lot of people who are interested in working with me come from religious backgrounds that kind of taught them that this kind of work was like not of God's work, et cetera, et cetera. So what's like your best advice for people to just kind of like get started, come out of the closet, just get curious about their abilities?
Yeah, I think first of all, I always, whenever anyone talks about being scared, I just want to say to them, I myself have never really had a scary experience of spirit, like I just don't. I think we often don't understand, and so we label it as scary. But just because we don't understand their way of reaching out doesn't mean they're here to hurt us, or that you're going to get possessed, or any kind of crazy, scary, like fear-based, belief. I don't buy into it, and I haven't really had the experience. So for someone who's been working for 11, 12 years now, I just want people to know I personally have experienced it. Doesn't mean it's not out there, but I think if you don't go looking for it and you kind of work with the best of intention, it's not going to go grab you in the closet, so to speak.
It's a
So
very good point.
yeah, so that's always something I want to acknowledge. And then the second part of it is really it's a journey. The experience of working, if you're called to do it, that call isn't going to leave you alone. You're going to kind of keep coming back to it. So it's one of those things where take the next step, see how it unfolds for you. But in my experience and from what I've seen other people, it's hard to lock that away and expect it to stay put. It's
Mhm.
going to keep wanting to invite you into it. And yeah, I think there's something to be said for just giving yourself that freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah, I felt like I received three callings to this path, like at 17, and then again at 24, and then again finally at 31, when I finally was like, okay, this keeps coming back. Maybe I should start getting really curious about this.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
And
stubborn.
and I'm sure you feel this as well. Like there were times in my journey of kind of saying, okay, yeah, this is what I'm going to do, where I really thought I'm throwing my whole life away potentially, in that it's so scary. Like, what if people find out? And I remember somebody who had been working for quite some time go, it's really, you're going to look back and laugh at how scared you were. And
Mm.
I do now. And I'm sure you have the same experience. All those fears didn't play out at all.
No, and I felt like I just left my corporate career in February this year to go into this work full time after 7 years. And it was the scariest thing I've ever done in my life because I have children, I got a mortgage, like there was a lot on the line, but I just felt like not listening was making me sick. I was constantly sick. I was hospitalized. I was on heart monitors. Like I was just getting sick, not listening to my passion and where I was being led to. And really, living within that fear is your worst case scenario.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, congratulations. That's huge. Well done.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been pretty good, but it was funny because I quit and then 3 weeks later we were in quarantine.
Well, the good thing about this work is you can do it over the phone. So
100%. I noticed you do a lot on the phone too, which I really, really like. I do mostly online anyways because of the podcast. Most of my clients were international already. So it was okay for me. There's only like, I think a dozen people I had to reschedule that were coming in person. But I noticed like you do it a lot on the phone and because I don't ever get sitters who just like tell you too much sometimes because you're very good at explaining how you work to people in advance and just saying just say yes or no and people listen to you.
they do. Yeah. Every once in a while you'll have somebody who doesn't. But I think, when somebody starts saying more than yes or no, I do tend to politely stop them and say, first of all, don't give me much more because you're going to want to walk out of here and feel really validated. So this is about you walking out and going, okay, I didn't get that information. And second, it doesn't help my process, you know?
Mm,
Uh, actually is way easier for me to stay in connection with someone on the other side if the person in front of me is not talking. So because if they say something that feels like it's not a match to what I'm getting energetically, now I'm in conflict. And I'd
mm,
rather just be able to give it to them straight. Sometimes people have certain ways that they want to perceive an event, but it's not maybe the truth of the event. And so then it gets really conflicting if I have to then also kind of sift my way through the I don't know, the person sitting in front of me. Does that make sense?
100%.
I want
Absolutely.
to be working with the spirit, not with the person in front of me, and in a certain way, right? So that you can just pass the information on unfiltered, um, and then the person in front of you can make sense of it rather than kind of them trying to steer the direction of where it's going.
Yeah. And I felt too like it makes me feel a bit more nervous to give like the next pieces of information when they're giving me too much because I'm like, hey, am I being led here? Like it just kind of pulls you out of the energy with spirit, I find a little bit too. So That's something I'm getting a lot better at, just getting people to say yes or no, just so it can be a super clear channel. And that's why I tell people phone readings. I get so many questions. I even had an email from a client this week saying, I do not want a phone reading, like all in uppercase. And I'm like, man, phone readings are actually the most pure because I can't see you. I have no judgments of your age. It's just like literally a pure channel. Is that why you like to do phone readings more than anything else?
Well, I used to do them pretty 50-50, and then quarantine hit, and so I've had the same emails, to be honest. People are really upset. But I'm not going to be offering in-person readings for a while. So I think it's kind of at the end of the day, it's like, well, this is the way it's going, and I like phone readings. I think for the exact same reasons that you just shared. It's really nice for me able to just completely focus my attention on spirit and really not worry about someone's facial expression, if they're crossing their arms, if they look angry, whatever it is. That I'm human. It's really hard to go, okay, sir, you look really unhappy to be here. Let me, you know,
Yeah,
it's, I'm human. I'm going to have a reaction to that.
totally. It's just one less energy to deal with, right?
Absolutely. So some people are really lovely to work for in person, and I do love the human interaction. But yeah, the phone is nice. Is a really nice way to just be able to pass things along and really not worry about any kind of nonverbal communication.
Awesome. I agree. I think so too. So I just wanted to ask you to kind of like wrap things up and honor your time as well. I did receive a few Instagram questions, and I'm just going to read two because I think I've addressed all of them except for two. One of them is, what is the most reoccurring message you get from spirit?
Well, I'll tell you a funny one, and then I'll tell you the other recurring one. So the funny one was, for a while before the quarantine hit, I did not predict a quarantine. I will just say that. But for like 5 months beforehand, every reading, someone was asking me about whatever project they had going. And I was like, I don't know. I just keep seeing delays, to the point where I got annoyed with myself. I'm like, not everything is going to be delayed, Fleur. Like, you can't just keep saying delays. I don't know, like delays. So that one was kind of funny. It was just the reoccurring message was, yeah, no, that project's not going to happen. Um, so I thought that was funny. And then looking back, because it all made sense, right? Quarantine hit, and I was like, oh, got it.
Yeah.
Um, and then the reoccurring message from spirit is always the sense of, I'm around, I'm connected, I'm fine. I think, there is such a worry around that, a fear. I did too. Even being a medium, I still go, like, until you're there, you don't know. Um, but whenever I'm connected to spirit, it just feels really lovely. It really doesn't have the harsh realities that we kind of have to sift through. So that's always the reoccurring one, in that it's the very backbone and foundation of any connection.
Hmm. Yeah, funny pre-quarantine story too. In January of every year, some of my closest friends, I just do a yearly reading for, more psychic than anything else. And one of my friends sent me a video clip of my reading that I gave her in January. And it said, I don't know, there's something about March. Like the energy is just so weird in March, like for all the readings. So I didn't predict it either, but I just knew March was just like a really weird month. It was like all fuzzy. I couldn't connect to it at all. I was just like, yeah, March is just a really weird month. Really, really weird month.
It is funny. Yeah, exactly. Looking back at it now, I think, I was really just looking at things on the micro level for the individual, right? So, but never thought to take a macro look at it and go, there's a lot of reoccurring patterns here. I wonder what's going on with the world. Didn't even cross my mind.
Yeah, totally. Well, who would have, yeah, it's crazy. Who would have predicted this? But except for Sylvia Brown, apparently, right? I don't know if you saw that, her premonition from
Super
like
wild.
super wild. Okay, and then the final question just from the Instagram is, I had a question that I thought was really fascinating. They was wondering what your most like favorite reading was. Like, what was your most like
Oh,
memorable experience that you had?
oh my gosh, there are so many of them. It's hard for me to even pinpoint, but I would say that one of my most meaningful readings, I think, when I first realized how powerful this work could be happened really early on, and it wasn't the reading itself, but it was kind of the message I got afterwards. I had read for a woman, and she'd lost her son, and she had 4 other kids, and her son had passed 15 years ago. And the husband, who had not even been part of the reading, kind of reached out to me afterwards and just said, thank you for giving me my wife back. Like, after 15 years, she is a mother again. She's a wife, like, she's here. And I remember thinking, wow, how powerful that he didn't get the reading, he just saw the effects.
Mhm.
And so that was probably my favorite one in terms of, it was such a turning point for me. I thought, wow, like that's amazing. How that's incredible. I'd never thought that it could have that kind of impact. So yeah, I would say that one probably. There's been so many. Gosh, because I think at this point I counted them all up a while back, and something like 15,000 readings. So it's a
Wow.
lot.
Yeah.
So many.
Joke. You've
And
been busy for 11 years.
I've been busy, and yeah, every single one is different. Yeah, every
That's
single
what
one.
I try to tell people. I just, every reading feels so different. And I used to get so scared going into them because the unpredictability of it. But then I just started kind of having fun and just like embracing that they all feel a little bit different. The information always comes a little bit differently every single time, and just trying to like relax around it.
Yeah, I think that's also the beauty of it, because every person you talk to in the world is going to be a little different.
Mm.
So it's the same. You're just establishing a communication with someone. And I think, as you know, like, I really do feel that sometimes where there's people in spirit where I'm like, okay, look, how can we be friends? Like, how can we make it so that you want to talk to me?
Yeah. Well, do you find sometimes in spirit, like you have people who are not as great communicators in spirit than others?
I do, and it doesn't happen all that often, but maybe like once every couple of months. I was just telling a friend this. I'll connect with someone, and within the first 5 minutes, I'm like, you know what? Experience has taught me that I can force this for the next 45 minutes, and it's not going to do us any favors.
Mm.
So I'm going to reconnect with you next week. Give me another call. In the meantime, your loved ones are going to do some homework.
Yeah, yeah. I love that. Okay. Yeah, go work with your guides.
Yeah, I'll literally tell Spirit World, like, you can stick around all week in the office, watch how other people do it. I'm gonna need you to like be a little better.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Come
'Cause,
back when you're ready.
and some gonna work with it, and then it feels like it clicks into place. Like, either I find their energy, they find mine. We meet in the middle. I think, as a medium, sometimes it's also me just learning all the different vibrations. And there's a lot of people I feel over the years that I've met who go, I just have never been able to connect with this one person. Why is that? And I find usually they're really an odd passing. There's something about them that doesn't match up in the medium's head.
Mm.
So we almost discount it. Like, our brain goes, no, that doesn't make any sense. And I think that a big part of my work in the last couple of years has been trying to let that go, to just really receive what I receive rather than trying to make it fit, so that
Yes.
I can bring in some of the more weird cases without dismissing them.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Love it. Awesome. So if we want to just kind of end this with you, maybe telling the Spirit School listeners how they can learn more about you, any offerings you have going on, or anything that you want to share, and I'll link it all in the show notes as well.
Yeah, totally. Well, I am on Medium Fleur on Instagram and on Facebook, and at my website, mediumfleur.com. And there is currently the podcast, which we've talked about at length, Moving Beyond. I've got a journal on Amazon called 10 Minutes to Intuition. You can also find it on my website. There is a mentorship course that is starting up in August. It's a 2-month beginner intermediate course. And I think that's it for right now. And I do readings. So those are available on my website as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Medium Fleur. I really, really, really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. This is super fun.